So good afternoon, September 8th, 2014. This is CISG114, Section 1, Web Technology and Life. Today is the first class in the first week of the semester. So let's get started. Welcome back. Good afternoon. Today is September 8th, not 7th, day number 5, and Monday we have 2 classes this week. The other is on Thursday. Now, look at that. This is week number 3. In other words, you have 1 more week to go before you have to submit the artifacts for the first learning contract. Do you remember what you need to do? Okay? If you happen to forget what you need to do, make sure you visit the names for the teacher's message. Week number 3, week number 2, and week number 1. So, today, for the particular week, we have 2 topics to cover. Common module number 2, ethics and social responsibility. And on Thursday, digital divide as far as social responsibility. So if you look at the materials for today, as you can see that we have a lot to cover. We're going to say we have a lot to inquire. So to start with today's class, may I invite you to gather together and take a good look at this very simple refreshment of the ideas of IVL. Hopefully you've already watched this, and hopefully not. It's about 5 minutes reinforcements of what we would like to do.
Inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning.
Right.
Is that bad? I don't know that.
Here we go. One step at a time, don't be living overnight. I don't need a friend, I got more than on my mind. Sunshine in my brain, make you never will complain. Radio in the heart, don't be being so strange. It can losing it, everywhere you've been. Everybody says that you move it again. I want to ride.
Inquiry means to ask within. So what you're trying to do as a teacher is you've got to ask them to look inside themselves for the question, the desire to know something. You start with the desire to know.
Inquiry-based learning is about training students to act just like scholars. We, scholars, frame questions and we answer them. That's just what we're training students to do when they're in an inquiry-based learning environment. In an inquiry-based learning environment, they're acting just like scholars.
It wasn't simply a lecture. They were having to be active in coming up with their own ideas and interpretations. Even if they were wrong, you know, they had to be active in thinking about it rather than just be passive receptors of information.
There's a common misperception about inquiry-based learning, and that somehow inquiry-based learning doesn't involve lecturing. It does. In an inquiry-based learning environment, professors provide content. What's different is that students do something with the content that is very immediate to them. They'll go and apply those concepts and that content to questions that they've designed.
And that's the goal, to liberate the student into being the primary question asker and learner. The idea is to turn students into question askers again.
A lot of times we undermine what children know or what students like us know by not asking them questions, by not asking them to go out in the community, do research. We almost cripple them.
It's more engaging than regular textbook learning. When you actually care about what you're learning, then you remember it in the long term.
Instead, inquiry-based learning enables students to be part of knowledge.
If they don't get a chance to practice asking questions, then how are they ever going to get free? They're going to think they need a classroom or a teacher or a structure their whole lives.
It's important that they understand the knowledge that's in that textbook, but I think it's also important that Appalachian students have an understanding as to how does new knowledge and how are new discoveries made? How did that knowledge get into the textbook to begin with? Maybe even it spurs them on to think about, you know what, maybe I could discover something, or maybe I could do a study or create this piece of work that nobody else has done yet.
Don't ask a question you know the answer to. Ask genuine questions and try to pursue an investigation of the students.
If you want to get teachers to want to do this, they themselves have to be willing to do inquiry. They have to be the inquiry experts. They have to just wonder about everything.
It's much safer for the teacher just to get up in front like an expert and spout a lot of facts and impress people with how smart they are. It's much harder to reveal your own ignorance in front of a group of people when you're supposed to be the expert.
Then I have to model ignorance and confusion. I can't just model knowing. I have to model exploring.
Imagine accurately what students are interested in so you can make suggestions, so you can kind of get them to think in a curious way. And yet still fulfill the requirements of the class.
It's just much more straightforward for all of us if I just tell you. And if that's all I do, it's deadly.
I may do quite a bit of talking in any one class. In another class, they may be working on their own in small groups.
You got to have the common universe that everybody's working in, so everybody's taking the same class. But then students have to somehow individualize it or instantiate it in reasonably unique ways.
You definitely leave frustrated because the more you know, the more confused you are.
Accept that I'm learning in a different way now.
Students also resist. A lot of students do want to be told. They like to come in and say they're visual learners. I now know what this means. It means put a PowerPoint on the slide and let me copy stuff down.
Students usually come into my class at first, on the first day, thinking that knowledge is all about me, the professor, pouring some knowledge into their heads. And later they, the students, will take an exam and prove to me that they've memorized it.
It's really easy for me to hear something, see